He mockingly asked her to clean up a spill in front of elite guests while making jokes about her status. When she returned with 3-year-old Triplet boys who had his exact eyes and smile, champagne glasses froze mid-air throughout the silent room. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The pristine glass lobby of Thompson Enterprises reflected the morning sunlight, casting fractured rainbows across Gabriela Santos's desk. She straightened her posture and practiced her smile before answering the ringing phone. "Good morning, Thompson Enterprises. How may I direct your call?" Her Portuguese accent lingered on the edges of her words, softening consonants and warming vowels. The caller requested the marketing department, and Gabriela transferred the call, aware of the subtle smirk from the security guard who had been watching her. After 10 months at the reception desk, she had grown accustomed to the sidelong glances, the slightly raised eyebrows when she pronounced certain words, the conversations that slowed when she approached the break room. New York City in 2013 was supposed to be different. The city that welcomed the tired, the poor, the huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Wasn't that what the Statue of Liberty promised? Yet here, in this gleaming tower of capitalism, Gabriela often felt more foreign than she had the day she arrived from São Paulo. Her desk phone rang again. "Ms. Santos, please send up a coffee service to the executive conference room." The voice belonged to Janet, Mr. Thompson Sr.'s executive assistant. "Right away," Gabriela replied, careful to enunciate each syllable. As she coordinated with the catering staff, her eyes drifted to the textbook partially hidden beneath her desk calendar. Her business administration midterm at NYU was tomorrow, and she had planned to study during lunch break. Between full-time work and night classes, sleep had become a luxury she could rarely afford. That evening, Gabriela dragged herself up the 4 flights of stairs to her Brooklyn apartment. The elevator had been broken for weeks, and her landlord showed no signs of fixing it. Her roommate's television blared through the thin walls as Gabriela collapsed at the small desk wedged between her bed and the window. The city lights twinkled across the river, Manhattan's skyline a constant reminder of everything she was reaching for. She pulled out her textbooks, forcing her heavy eyelids to stay open. 3 more chapters before midnight. She could do this. She awoke with her face pressed against the page, drool smudging an important paragraph about market segmentation. The clock read 3:17 in the morning. Gabriela groaned, peeled herself from the desk and stumbled to bed, still in her work clothes. December arrived with a biting chill and the annual Thompson Enterprises holiday party. Gabriela had debated attending. Her worn black dress seemed woefully inadequate for the opulence of the Plaza Hotel, but her co-workers had insisted. "You never know who you might meet," her friend Lucia from accounting had said with a wink. The ballroom shimmered with crystal and silver, executives in designer suits mingling with their equally polished spouses. Gabriela nursed a glass of champagne in a corner, watching the social choreography unfold. "You don't look like you're having much fun." She turned to find Michael Thompson beside her. The vice president and heir to Thompson Enterprises stood tall and confident in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his blue eyes intense under the chandeliers. "Mr. Thompson." Gabriela straightened, suddenly self-conscious. "I'm just taking it all in." "Please call me Michael." His smile revealed perfect teeth. "And you're Gabriela, right? From reception?" Her heart skipped. He knew her name. "Yes, that's right." "Your accent? Brazilian?" "São Paulo." She nodded. "Beautiful city. I visited once for a conference." He leaned closer. "Want to know a secret? These parties are insufferable. Same people, same conversations, year after year." The way he included her in his confidence made Gabriela smile genuinely for the first time that evening. Their conversation flowed easily as they moved to a quieter corner. Michael asked about her studies, seeming genuinely impressed when she described her scholarship at NYU. As midnight approached, he wrote his private number on a napkin. "I'd like to continue this conversation somewhere less crowded." Perhaps dinner next week? That dinner led to another, and soon they were meeting regularly at his luxurious apartment in Trump Tower. Gabriella knew the boundaries of their relationship. Michael never took her to industry events or introduced her to his family. Their relationship existed within the plush confines of his penthouse, where he would pour expensive champagne and trail the bubbling liquid across her skin. "You're my sweetest secret," he whispered against her neck one night, the city lights twinkling far below them. Gabriella tried to ignore the society pages that occasionally showed Michael with some blonde socialite at charity galas. When she asked about it, he kissed her forehead. "Just appearances, darling. Business requires certain performances." She almost believed him, almost. Spring bloomed across Central Park, and Gabriella's grades remained excellent despite her exhaustion. One morning in May, she woke with a peculiar nausea that didn't subside. After 3 days, she purchased a pregnancy test from a pharmacy far from her apartment. The bathroom floor was cold beneath her as she stared at the plastic stick. Not one, not two, but 3 pink lines appeared. Her hands trembled as she pulled out her phone and scheduled an emergency doctor's appointment. "Congratulations, Ms. Santos," the doctor said hours later, pointing to the ultrasound screen. "You're carrying triplets." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Triplets. 3 babies. Gabriella placed a protective hand over her still flat stomach, terror and wonder fighting for dominance in her heart. That evening, she stood outside Michael's building, rehearsing her words. The doorman recognized her and nodded her through. In the elevator, she clutched a small gift box containing 3 tiny baby shoes she'd impulsively purchased on the way. Michael greeted her with a kiss. "This is a surprise. I thought you had class tonight." "I needed to see you." Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. "Can we sit down?" They settled on his leather sofa. Manhattan sprawled before them through floor-to-ceiling windows. Gabriella's hands trembled as she passed him the small box. "What's this?" he asked, a playful smile on his lips. "Just open it." Michael untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. His expression froze as he stared at the 3 miniature shoes. "I'm pregnant, Michael," her voice barely audible. "And the doctor confirmed they're triplets." His face transformed instantly, as if a mask had dropped away. The warmth vanished from his eyes, replaced by a coldness that made Gabriella shiver. "That's impossible." His voice was flat. "You must have been with someone else. Is this some kind of scheme?" The accusation struck like a physical blow. "You know there's no other man." Michael laughed, a harsh sound utterly unlike the warm chuckles she'd grown to love. "And you really think I, heir to Thompson Enterprises, would throw everything away for a Latina receptionist who can barely string together a sentence without butchering the grammar?" Each word pierced Gabriella like a knife. She watched, frozen, as he strode to his mahogany desk and yanked open a drawer. He pulled out a checkbook and filled it out with jerky movements. $5,000. He thrust the check toward her. "Enough to solve your problem and buy a ticket back to Brazil if you prefer. Don't contact me again. Security has been advised." Tears blurred her vision. "These are your children, Michael. Your heirs." "Heirs?" His laughter echoed through the apartment. "Thompson Enterprises won't be run by half-Brazilian bastards. You'll never be anything more than an immigrant lucky enough to have gotten this far. Go back to the work you actually deserve, serving coffee or cleaning offices." The words cut deeper than any physical wound could. Gabriella stood shakily, her body numb as Michael called building security. "Please escort Ms. Santos out. She won't be on the approved visitor list anymore." The security guard, the same one who had smiled at her just last week, maintained an impassive expression as he guided her to the elevator. Gabriella clutched the crumpled check in her fist, her other hand instinctively shielding her stomach. The subway car rattled and screeched toward Brooklyn, the late-night commuters swaying in exhausted silence. Gabriella stared at the check in her hands, tears blurring the numbers. $5,000. The price Michael Thompson had placed on his own children. She thought of the life growing inside her. 3 tiny heartbeats, completely dependent on her. How would she manage? Her student visa required full-time employment. Her shared apartment barely had room for her, let alone 3 infants. Her parents in Brazil, struggling themselves, couldn't help financially. As the subway lurched between stations, Gabriella's tears gave way to something harder, something forged in the fire of humiliation and betrayal. She straightened her spine and wiped her eyes. "He will regret every word," she whispered to her unborn children, a solemn vow in the rattling darkness. The next morning, she deposited the check and requested a transfer to a different department at Thompson Enterprises. She would need every penny for what lay ahead. If Michael thought she would slink away defeated, he was about to learn how badly he had misjudged the woman he had discarded. With only $5,000 in her pocket and 3 lives growing inside her, Gabriella couldn't imagine that this check, intended to eliminate her, would be the first investment in the empire that would one day swallow Thompson Enterprises whole. The $5,000 check burned in Gabriella's pocket as she stepped out of the bank. She had momentarily considered tearing it to pieces, throwing Michael's charity back in his face. But practicality won over pride. With 3 lives growing inside her, pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. 2 weeks after that devastating night in the Trump Tower, Gabriella arrived at the Thompson Enterprises HR department first thing in the morning. "I'd like to request a department transfer," she said to the HR manager, a thin woman with perpetually pursed lips. "Reason?" the woman asked without looking up from her computer. "Personal," Gabriella replied firmly. The woman finally looked up, studying Gabriella with clinical detachment. "There's nothing available above your qualification level, Ms. Santos." "I understand." 3 days later, Gabriella was informed her transfer request had been denied. That afternoon, as she sorted mail at the reception desk, Janet from Executive Administration approached with an envelope. "Your termination papers," she said quietly. "I'm sorry, Gabriella. The official reason is restructuring, but—" Her eyes flicked meaningfully toward the executive floor. Gabriella nodded, understanding perfectly. Michael had made sure she would disappear from his world entirely. That evening, her landlord knocked on her door. "Rent's going up next month, 300 more. Take it or leave it." The walls of her tiny Brooklyn apartment seemed to close in around her. The check from Michael would cover 3 months of the increased rent, maybe 4 if she ate nothing but ramen. After that, morning sickness struck with vengeance during her 6th week of pregnancy. Gabriella knelt on the cold bathroom floor, emptying her stomach while trying not to wake her roommate. 3 times the hormones, 3 times the nausea. The doctor had explained this was common with multiples. By week 8, her carefully pressed business attire no longer fit her blooming body. Job interviews became exercises in strategic wardrobe manipulation, with loose blouses and unbuttoned jacket bottoms. The rejections piled up. Her student visa restrictions, the employment gap from Thompson Enterprises, and the economy still recovering from recession all worked against her. On a drizzly Tuesday morning, Gabriella sat in the waiting room of a corporate cleaning service. "Experience?" asked the manager, a heavy-set woman with tired eyes. "I cleaned houses in Brazil to pay for English lessons," Gabriella replied, omitting her business administration degree and her semester on the dean's list at NYU. "We clean offices, not houses. Night shift, minimum wage plus 50 cents. Start tomorrow, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Gabriella calculated quickly. Barely enough for food and the coming rent increase. Not enough for prenatal vitamins, doctor visits, or anything the babies would need. "I'll take it," she said. "And do you know anyone hiring for day shifts?" The next month passed in a blur of exhaustion. Gabriella mopped floors and emptied trash bins in corporate offices at night, watching executives work late, their eyes sliding past her as if she were invisible. During the day, she waited tables at a diner in Midtown, hiding her growing belly beneath a large apron. She slept in fractured 3-hour increments, often waking to rush to the bathroom, her body rebelling against the punishing schedule. The textbooks from her abandoned NYU courses gathered dust under her bed. One night, as she vacuumed the executive floor of a financial firm, Gabriella paused before an office almost identical to Michael's. The same mahogany desk, the same skyline view. She wondered if the man who worked here would also cast aside a woman carrying his children like garbage to be disposed of. "You're blocking my door!" Gabriella startled. A silver-haired executive stood watching her, briefcase in hand. "I'm sorry, sir," she mumbled, moving the vacuum cleaner aside. His eyes lingered on her face. "You don't look like the usual cleaning staff." "I'm just trying to pay my bills, sir." He nodded, seemingly satisfied with her answer, and walked away. Gabriella returned to vacuuming, her back aching from the weight of the triplets growing inside her. At the 3-month mark, her roommate confronted her. "You're pregnant, aren't you? I can't have a crying baby in here. My boyfriend's moving in next month anyway." "I understand," Gabriella said, her voice hollow. "I'll be out by the 1st. That night, she sat on a park bench counting her remaining money. The cleaning service paid in cash, the diner mostly in tips. After setting aside money for food and prenatal vitamins, she had barely enough for a security deposit on another apartment, certainly not enough for 3 months' rent up front, which most landlords required from someone with her credit history. A homeless woman pushed a cart past her, making eye contact briefly. Gabriella saw her own possible future reflected in the woman's weathered face. The following week, after being turned away from the 5th apartment viewing, Gabriella found herself at the intake desk of a women's shelter in Queens. "How far along are you?" asked the intake worker, a kind-faced woman with gray-streaked braids. 3 months. Triplets." The woman's eyebrows rose. "Father in the picture?" "No. We have a bed available for 30 days. After that, we'll need to reassess." The shelter room held 4 bunk beds, each occupied by women in various states of crisis. Gabriella placed her single suitcase under the bottom bunk assigned to her and lay down, one hand protectively cradling her stomach. "First night's the hardest," whispered the woman in the next bunk, her eye blackened from a recent beating. "It gets easier." Gabriella wasn't sure if she believed her. Despite everything, she continued studying whenever possible. Between shifts, she sat in public libraries with borrowed textbooks, determined to keep her mind active. She found a sympathetic professor who allowed her to complete assignments remotely, though she had to withdraw officially from NYU when she could no longer afford tuition. At 16 weeks pregnant, Gabriella's body could no longer hide her condition. The manager at the diner moved her from waiting tables to kitchen prep, away from customers' eyes. Her cleaning supervisor assigned her lighter duties, but the pay remained the same, barely enough to survive. The women at the shelter helped her apply for emergency Medicaid, ensuring she could continue prenatal care. Each ultrasound showed 3 healthy babies, developing perfectly despite their mother's circumstances. "Identical boys," the clinic doctor told her, "extremely rare with spontaneous triplets. They're fighters, like their mother." One rainy evening in her 5th month of pregnancy, after 16 hours of continuous work between her 2 jobs, Gabriella served a late dinner to a regular customer at the diner. The woman always ordered the same thing: Greek salad, dressing on the side, and unsweetened iced tea, and always left a generous tip. "You look exhausted," the woman commented, watching Gabriella struggle to refill her water glass. "I'm fine, ma'am," Gabriella replied automatically. The room suddenly tilted. Gabriella heard glass shattering as the water pitcher slipped from her grasp. Then darkness. She awakened to bright lights and the antiseptic smell of a hospital room. The customer from the diner sat beside her bed, typing on a laptop. "Welcome back," the woman said, setting her computer aside. "I'm Lucy Miller. The ambulance. I can't afford—" "Already taken care of," Lucy interrupted. "The doctors say you're severely dehydrated and anemic. They want to keep you overnight for observation." Tears filled Gabriella's eyes. "I have to work tomorrow. Both jobs." "Both?" Lucy raised an eyebrow. Perhaps it was the exhaustion, the hormones, or simply reaching her breaking point, but Gabriella found herself telling this stranger everything. The affair with Michael, the pregnancy, the rejection, the struggle to survive. Lucy listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "And Thompson never offered any support beyond that initial check?" Gabriella shook her head. "He made it clear he wanted nothing to do with the babies or me." Lucy closed her laptop with a decisive click. "I run an environmental consulting firm in Astoria. It's small but growing. I need an administrative assistant who understands business operations. The position comes with health insurance." Gabriella stared at her. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." "I know enough," Lucy replied. "I know you're working 2 physically demanding jobs while pregnant with triplets. I know you're still studying business administration despite everything. That tells me you're exactly the kind of person I want working for me." "I can't accept charity," Gabriella said quietly. "This isn't charity. It's an opportunity. One you've earned through your determination. My spare bedroom is yours until you find your footing." 2 days later, Gabriella moved into Lucy's modest but comfortable house in Queens. The small bedroom was larger than her space at the shelter, with a real bed and a window overlooking a tiny backyard. For the first time in months, Gabriella slept without fear. Working for Lucy's firm, Green Future Consulting, gave Gabriella a glimpse of what her life might have been if Michael hadn't discarded her. Lucy respected her opinions, encouraged her to contribute ideas, and adjusted her workload to accommodate her pregnancy. In the evenings, they often sat in Lucy's kitchen discussing business strategies over herbal tea. Gabriella found herself sharing knowledge from her business courses, surprising even herself with how much she had retained. "Why environmental consulting?" Gabriella asked one night. Lucy smiled wryly. "I spent 20 years in corporate energy, watching companies destroy the planet for profit. One day I realized I was part of the problem. Green Future is my attempt to be part of the solution." As her due date approached, Gabriella transformed the small bedroom into a nursery, fitting 3 second-hand cribs into the limited space. Lucy helped her apply for benefits and connected her with a nonprofit that provided essential baby supplies. On a snowy January morning, Gabriella's water broke. Lucy drove her to the hospital, stayed through 18 hours of labor, and held her hand as 3 perfect, identical boys entered the world within minutes of each other. "Alexander, Benjamin, and Christopher," Gabriella whispered, kissing each tiny forehead. The babies were small but healthy, each with a shock of dark hair and, when they briefly opened their eyes, unmistakable blue irises, Michael's eyes. Holding her sons for the first time, Gabriella felt tears streaming down her face, not just from joy but from renewed determination. "You will never know rejection," she promised them softly. "And one day, I'll prove to that man that he didn't just lose a family. He lost an empire." Lucy stepped out to give Gabriella a moment alone with her newborns. Looking at the 3 perfect faces, each a miniature replica of the man who had rejected them, Gabriella felt a strange sense of peace. Michael had given her something precious, despite his cruelty, and one day she would show him exactly what he had thrown away. While Gabriella cradled her newborn sons in the hospital room, she couldn't know that the elderly woman who shared Lucy's last name, visiting from the adjacent room, would become fascinated by her story, or that this chance encounter would lead to an investment opportunity that would change the trajectory of all their lives. The elderly woman from the adjacent hospital room knocked gently on Gabriella's door 3 days after the birth. Her name was Eleanor Miller, Lucy's aunt, and her curiosity had been piqued by Lucy's excited accounts of the triplets. "They're absolutely beautiful," Eleanor said, peering at the 3 identical faces. "And what a story you have, my dear." Gabriella smiled tiredly. "Not exactly the American dream I imagined." "Perhaps not," Eleanor replied, her eyes twinkling. but sometimes the best dreams are the ones we haven't imagined yet. 2 weeks later, Gabriella settled into a new routine in Lucy's home. The small bedroom had been transformed with 3 bassinets crowded together, a changing table wedged against the wall, and supplies stacked in every available corner. Sleep came in 90-minute increments between feedings, diaper changes, and soothing cries that seemed choreographed to ensure she never rested. One morning, Lucy found Gabriella at the kitchen table, surrounded by spreadsheets, a sleeping baby strapped to her chest while the other 2 dozed in a portable bassinet nearby. "What's all this?" Lucy asked, pouring coffee. "Expense projections," Gabriella replied, suppressing a yawn. "I've calculated costs for the next 18 years. It's..." She trailed off, staring at the numbers. "Terrifying?" Lucy offered. "Impossible," Gabriella corrected. "Even if I return to work soon, childcare for triplets would consume most of my salary." Lucy studied the spreadsheets, impressed by their detail. "You've got a head for numbers." "Business administration," Gabriella reminded her. "I was halfway through my MBA when..." She gestured to the babies. "When life had other plans," Lucy finished for her. "Have you considered finishing your degree?" Gabriella laughed without humor. "Between 3 newborns and work? Besides, I can't afford tuition. There are online programs, scholarships for single mothers. It won't be easy, but if anyone can manage it..." That afternoon, while the triplets napped, Gabriella researched her options. Lucy was right. There were possibilities she hadn't considered. By evening, she had applied to 3 online MBA programs and identified potential scholarships. 4 months after the birth, Gabriella started working remotely for Green Future Consulting while taking online courses. Her days became a blur of spreadsheets, assignments, feedings, and 2 short naps. She worked while the babies slept, often staying up until 3 in the morning to complete coursework. One night, Lucy found her asleep at the kitchen table, her forehead resting on her laptop keyboard. A half-finished report glowed on the screen, and beside her, a textbook lay open to a chapter on sustainable business practices. "Gabriella," Lucy said gently, touching her shoulder, "you can't keep this up." Gabriella jerked awake, momentarily disoriented. "The boys are sleeping. For now." Lucy sat across from her. "You're pushing too hard." "I don't have a choice," Gabriella replied, rubbing her eyes. "I need this degree to give them a better life." "I understand ambition, but you need to pace yourself. This is a marathon, not a sprint." Later that week, Lucy brought home a proposal. She'd restructured her consulting business to give Gabriella flexible hours and a modest salary increase. Additionally, she'd converted her rarely used dining room into a makeshift nursery, allowing Gabriella to work with the babies nearby. "This is too generous," Gabriella protested. "It's practical," Lucy countered. "Your analysis of the Westchester Solar Project saved us thousands. I'm investing in talent." As the triplets reached 6 months, their personalities began to emerge. Alexander, the firstborn, watched everything with intense focus. Benjamin explored constantly, testing boundaries and materials. Christopher responded dramatically to music, waving his tiny hands when Gabriella sang. "They're extraordinary," Lucy commented one evening, watching Benjamin methodically stack blocks while Alexander observed and Christopher provided percussion by banging a spoon. "They are," Gabriella agreed softly. "Sometimes I look at them and see him, the shape of their eyes, the way Alex tilts his head when he's curious. It's like having 3 tiny reminders of Michael." "Does that bother you?" Gabriella considered the question. "Not anymore. They may have his features, but their hearts and minds will be shaped by love, not rejection." By the triplets' first birthday, Gabriella had completed half of her online MBA program with a perfect GPA. Green Future Consulting had grown, adding 2 full-time staff and expanding to larger offices in Astoria. Lucy insisted that Gabriella bring the boys to work 2 days a week, transforming a storage room into a playpen area. It's not conventional, Lucy admitted, but neither are we. The community they'd built surprised Gabriella. Lucy's employees took turns entertaining the triplets during meetings. Clients often brought gifts for the boys. Even Eleanor, now a frequent visitor, volunteered to babysit occasionally. One evening, after the boys had been put to bed, Lucy approached Gabriella with an unusual proposal. "I've been reading about a problem with energy storage for solar installations," she began, spreading articles across the kitchen table. "The current battery technology is inefficient and prohibitively expensive for smaller projects." Gabriella nodded, familiar with the issue from several client complaints. "What if there was a more affordable solution?" Lucy continued. "Something that could make renewable energy viable for more communities?" For hours they discussed possibilities, sketching ideas and running preliminary calculations. Gabriella's business background complemented Lucy's environmental expertise perfectly. By midnight, they had the outline of a concept that seemed promising. "We should patent this," Lucy said finally. "Patent what? It's just an idea right now." "Ideas become innovations with the right minds behind them," Lucy replied. "And I think we have the right minds." Over the next 6 months, while continuing her MBA studies and raising the triplets, Gabriella worked with Lucy to refine their energy storage concept. They consulted with engineers, researched materials, and developed a business plan for what they began calling the Horizon System. When the boys turned 2, Gabriella completed her MBA with honors. The ceremony was small, but meaningful. Lucy and Eleanor sat in the audience holding the toddlers, who clapped enthusiastically when Gabriella crossed the stage, even though they didn't understand the significance. That night, while the boys slept peacefully in their beds, Gabriella and Lucy celebrated with champagne on the small balcony of their now shared apartment. "I have something for you," Lucy said, handing Gabriella an envelope. Inside was paperwork for a new business entity, Horizon Innovations, LLC. "We're partners," Lucy explained. 50-50. The patent application for our storage system is being filed next week." Tears filled Gabriella's eyes. "Lucy, I can't possibly—" "You can and you will," Lucy interrupted firmly. "This isn't charity, it's recognition of your brilliance and hard work. The Horizon system wouldn't exist without you." Later that night, unable to sleep despite exhaustion, Gabriella opened her laptop and searched for Michael Thompson. His father had passed away 6 months earlier, and Michael had assumed leadership of Thompson Enterprises. The company was now focusing on aggressive acquisitions, often dismantling smaller competitors for parts and patents. A recent photo showed Michael at a charity gala, a model thin blonde on his arm. His face seemed harder than she remembered, his smile not reaching his eyes. The caption identified the woman as his third girlfriend that year. Gabriella felt nothing. Not anger, not pain, not even satisfaction at his apparent emotional emptiness. She closed the laptop and walked to the boys' room, watching their peaceful sleep. Alexander's thumb was in his mouth. Benjamin had somehow turned completely sideways in his bed, and Christopher clutched a small stuffed piano. "You're missing everything," she whispered to the absent father, "and someday you'll realize what that cost you." When the triplets turned 3, Horizon Innovations secured its first municipal contract to install their revolutionary storage system for a small solar farm in New Jersey. The project was modest, but it proved their concept worked in real-world conditions. "This is just the beginning," Lucy told Gabriella as they watched the system being activated. "Think of where we'll be in 5 years." Gabriella smiled, thinking of the spreadsheet projections she'd created. "If we maintain this trajectory and secure the patent for the secondary applications, we could be looking at a $20 million company by then." Lucy laughed, always the pragmatic one. "I was thinking bigger." "How much bigger?" "Industry-changing bigger." That night, after reading bedtime stories to the boys, 3 books, 1 for each child as they insisted, Gabriella created characters about 3 little inventors who saved the world. Alexander wanted to know how the machines worked, Benjamin asked why the problem existed in the first place, and Christopher wanted the story to include songs. As she tucked them in, Christopher asked the question she'd been expecting for months. "Mama, why don't we have a daddy like Leo at preschool?" Gabriella sat on the edge of the bed, choosing her words carefully. Families come in many different shapes. Some have a mom and dad, some have two moms or two dads, some have just one parent. "We have two moms," Alexander pointed out, referring to Lucy. "That's right," Gabriella agreed. "You have two moms who love you very much." "But no dad?" Benjamin persisted. "No dad," Gabriella confirmed gently. "And that's okay." The questions were simpler than she'd feared, their young minds accepting her answers without the complications adults would add. Someday they would want more details, but for now, this was enough. Later that evening, Lucy found Gabriella studying reports on Thompson Enterprises. The company had recently faced criticism for environmental violations at several of its subsidiaries. "Why do you still keep tabs on them?" Lucy asked, peering over her shoulder. Gabriella didn't look up from the screen. "It's not obsession, Lucy. It's strategy. Knowing your enemy is the first step to surpassing them." "Enemy? That sounds personal?" "It is personal," Gabriella admitted, "but it's also business. Thompson operates in sectors adjacent to renewable energy. Eventually, our paths will cross." Lucy studied her partner's determined expression. "You're planning something beyond horizon, aren't you?" Gabriella finally looked up, her eyes clear and focused. "Let's just say I'm taking a long-term view of justice." The next day, Gabriella opened a small investment account with $5,000, the exact amount of Michael's dismissive check. She named it Future Horizons and made its first purchase, 10 shares of Thompson Enterprises stock. While the first investors began knocking on Horizon Innovations' door, no one suspected that the small investment fund Gabriella had just created with her first savings had a single target: silently acquiring shares of Thompson Enterprises. The small investment account that Gabriella had established held only a symbolic meaning at first. 10 shares of Thompson Enterprises stock weren't going to change anything in the immediate future, but the act itself felt like planting a seed that would someday grow into something Michael could no longer ignore. 3 years passed with the rhythm of seasons changing outside the windows of their modest Astoria apartment. Horizon Innovations grew from a promising concept into a tangible business with real clients and growing revenues. The small office Lucy had rented in a converted warehouse became their headquarters, filled with second-hand furniture, technical diagrams, and a corner dedicated to the triplets, complete with tiny desks and educational toys. On a crisp autumn morning, Gabriella arrived early at the office, preparing for a presentation to the sustainability board of a small town in Connecticut. The boys, now 3 years old, tumbled in behind her, their identical faces alight with the energy only toddlers possess. "Mama, look!" Alexander held up a drawing of what appeared to be a solar panel, remarkably accurate for a 3-year-old. "That's wonderful, meu amor," Gabriella praised, pinning it to the corkboard already covered with their artwork. Lucy arrived carrying coffee and pastries. "The future engineers of Horizon Innovations have arrived, I see." The boys rushed to her, wrapping their arms around her legs. In the 3 years since their birth, Lucy had become as much their mother as Gabriella. The 4 of them had formed an unconventional but loving family unit. "Are you ready for the presentation?" Lucy asked, setting down the coffee. Gabriella nodded, organizing her notes one final time. "The Danbury board seems receptive based on our preliminary discussions. If we can secure this contract, it could open doors to other municipalities. And if they're skeptical? Then I'll remind them that our system costs 20% less than traditional storage methods and has twice the efficiency." The presentation took place in a wood-paneled town hall before 5 middle-aged men who regarded Gabriella with thinly veiled skepticism. Her accent, though softer after years in New York, still marked her as an outsider, Her youth and gender didn't help matters. "Ms. Santos Miller," began the chairman, emphasizing her hyphenated surname with subtle condescension, "your proposal is certainly ambitious, but our town has always used traditional power systems. Why should we be guinea pigs for an unproven technology?" Gabriella smiled, remembering similar dismissive tones from executives at Thompson Enterprises. "With respect, Mr. Chairman, your current system costs taxpayers an additional $43,000 annually in unnecessary energy loss. Our system would eliminate that waste while transitioning your municipal buildings to clean energy." For 40 minutes, she addressed every concern with precise data and clear explanations, transforming skepticism into cautious interest. By the end, the board agreed to a pilot installation for the town hall building. Outside, Lucy waited with the triplets, who had been entertained by Lucy's assistant during the meeting. "Well?" Lucy asked. Gabriella's smile said everything. "They're starting with one building, but the contract includes an option for the entire municipal system if the pilot meets benchmarks." That evening, they celebrated with cheap champagne in plastic cups at the office. The boys joined the toast with apple juice, giggling as the adults clinked their glasses together. "To Horizon's first major contract," Lucy declared. "And many more to come," Gabriella added. Later that week, Gabriella sat across from a loan officer at the third bank they'd visited. The first two had already rejected their application for expansion capital. "Your business model is—" The man paused, scanning the documents. "Ambitious for a company with your limited track record. Our limited track record includes a municipal contract and 3 commercial installations, all completed on time and under budget," Gabriella countered. The man peered at her over his glasses. "Ms. Santos, while your academic credentials are impressive, the bank has concerns about the stability of leadership." "Meaning?" "Meaning that as a single mother of 3 young children, your ability to fully commit to growing this business raises questions for our lending committee." Gabriella stiffened. "I've maintained a perfect GPA through an MBA program while raising triplets and building a company from scratch. Does that suggest a lack of commitment to you?" The loan was denied. The rejection letter arrived 3 days later, wrapped in polite corporate language that couldn't disguise the underlying prejudice. "Third rejection," Gabriella sighed, showing the letter to Lucy as they closed up the office that evening. "Maybe we need to consider outside investors." Lucy shook her head. "Investors will want equity and control. We're not ready to dilute our vision yet." "Then how do we expand without capital?" "We get creative," Lucy replied, "and we prove them wrong, one contract at a time." That night, after putting the boys to bed with stories about brave inventors solving impossible problems, Gabriella sat at the kitchen table with her laptop. She pulled up the Thompson Enterprises annual report, studying the company's recent acquisitions and divestitures. Under Michael's leadership, the company had grown more aggressive, often at the expense of ethical considerations. Lucy found her still working past midnight. "You should sleep," she advised, setting a cup of tea beside the computer. "Just researching the competition," Gabriella replied without looking up. Lucy glanced at the screen. "Thompson again? Why do you care about them when we have our own challenges?" Gabriella finally looked up. "It's not obsession, Lucy. It's strategy. Knowing your enemy is the first step to surpassing them." "Enemy? That sounds personal." "It is personal," Gabriella admitted, "but it's also business. Thompson operates in sectors adjacent to renewable energy. Eventually, our paths will cross." Lucy studied her partner's determined expression. "You're planning something beyond Horizon, aren't you? Let's just say I'm taking a long-term view of justice." The following day, Gabriella initiated a systematic file on Thompson Enterprises, tracking their financial weaknesses, ethical lapses, and strategic vulnerabilities. She noted how Michael had gutted the company's research division while expanding its lobbying budget. The Thompson name still carried weight, but the foundation was showing cracks. As summer approached, Horizon secured 2 more small contracts. The successful implementation of their storage system at the Danbury Town Hall had generated positive press in industry publications. A technology journalist visited their modest operation, initially skeptical but increasingly impressed as Gabriella demonstrated the system's capabilities. "This could revolutionize municipal energy storage," he noted, taking photographs of their prototype. 2 weeks later, his article appeared in a prominent tech journal. "Startup led by immigrant entrepreneur revolutionizes energy storage." The piece highlighted not only the technology but Gabriella's unlikely journey from MBA student to innovative business leader. The morning the article was published, Gabriella carefully cut it out and pinned it to her office wall. Beneath it, she placed Alexander's childish drawing of a solar panel. The phone began ringing almost immediately. Potential clients, curious investors, even larger competitors interested in partnerships. Lucy hired a receptionist to handle the sudden influx of calls. "This is what traction feels like," Lucy observed as they reviewed the new inquiries. Among the emails was one from a small angel investment group specializing in clean technology. They were offering $500,000 for a 15% stake in Horizon Innovations. "Should we consider it?" Gabriella asked, showing Lucy the proposal. "500,000 would fund the expansion we need," Lucy acknowledged, "but 15% is steep." "We'd maintain control," Gabriella pointed out. "And with this capital, we could fulfill multiple contracts simultaneously." After a week of negotiation, they accepted a modified offer, $400,000 for 12%, with Gabriella and Lucy retaining majority control. The influx of capital allowed them to hire 3 engineers, lease better equipment, and move to a larger office space in Long Island City, with a proper area for the boys. The day they moved into the new office, Gabriella stood by the windows overlooking the East River, Manhattan's skyline gleaming in the distance. Somewhere in those towers, Michael Thompson was probably sitting in a corner office, unaware that the woman he had discarded was building something that would one day challenge his inheritance. As Horizon Innovations grew, so did the Triplets. Now approaching their 4th birthday, they attended a progressive preschool that accommodated their precocious minds. Alexander already showed an uncanny ability with numbers, Benjamin constantly questioned how things worked, and Christopher had begun piano lessons, his small fingers surprisingly dexterous on the keys. One evening, as Gabriella helped the boys prepare for bed, Alexander asked the question she'd been anticipating. "Mama, why don't we have a daddy like Leo at preschool?" Gabriella sat on the edge of the bed, choosing her words carefully. "Families come in many different shapes. Some have a mom and dad, some have 2 moms or 2 dads, some have just one parent." "We have 2 moms," Alexander pointed out, referring to Lucy. "That's right," Gabriella agreed. "You have 2 moms who love you very much." "But no dad," Benjamin persisted. "No dad," Gabriella confirmed gently. "And that's okay." The questions were simpler than she'd feared, their young minds accepting her answers without the complications adults would add. Someday they would want more details, but for now, this was enough. As the boys drifted to sleep, Gabriella checked her investment account. The small fund had grown modestly, and she had systematically purchased additional Thomson Enterprises shares whenever her budget allowed. It was still a negligible stake, less than 1%, but the foundation was being laid. That night, she read about Michael's latest business move. Thomson Enterprises had acquired a struggling manufacturing company, immediately laying off 30% of its workforce while Thompson himself was photographed at the Monaco Grand Prix with his latest girlfriend. Gabriella closed the laptop and walked to the boys' room, watching their peaceful sleep. Alexander's thumb was in his mouth. Benjamin had somehow turned completely sideways in his bed, and Christopher clutched a small, stuffed piano. "You're missing everything," she whispered to the absent father. "And someday you'll realize what that cost you." While the first investors began knocking on Horizon Innovations' door, No one suspected that the small investment fund Gabriella had just created with her first savings had a single target: silently acquiring shares of Thomson Enterprises. The growth of Gabriella's investment fund mirrored the growth of Horizon Innovations itself: steady, purposeful, and increasingly ambitious. What had begun as a symbolic gesture was developing into a substantive portfolio, with 4% of Thomson Enterprises stock now secured through careful, methodical acquisitions. The media had begun to take notice of Horizon's revolutionary storage technology, and inquiries from potential clients arrived daily at their expanding office. By the time the triplets turned 4, Horizon Innovations had outgrown its Long Island City space. The grand opening of their new headquarters in a gleaming mid-rise building in Manhattan marked a symbolic turning point. The entire top floor featured floor-to-ceiling windows, modern workstations, and a dedicated research lab. Gabriella stood at the center of the gathered employees, investors, and clients, raising a glass of champagne. 4 years ago, Horizon existed only as sketches on my kitchen table, she said, her accent now a subtle melody rather than a hindrance. Today, we're changing how cities across America store and utilize renewable energy. This is just the beginning. Applause filled the room as Gabriella's gaze found the 3 identical boys in the corner, proudly wearing miniature Horizon Innovations ties that Lucy had specially ordered for the occasion. Alexander was carefully examining the architectural model of the building. Benjamin was asking the chief engineer detailed questions about the solar panels on the roof, and Christopher was charming the mayor's wife with stories about his piano lessons. Lucy joined Gabriella by the windows, both women watching the Manhattan skyline as the evening light painted the buildings in gold. "Quite a journey from that hospital room," Lucy commented. "We're not done yet," Gabriella replied, her eyes finding the Thomson Enterprises tower several blocks away. 3 months later, Gabriella stepped off a plane at Tokyo International Airport, her body exhausted but her mind racing with possibilities. The Japanese conglomerate Nakamura Energy had expressed interest in implementing Horizon's storage system across their extensive portfolio of properties. If secured, it would be their first major international contract. In her hotel room, Gabriella set up her laptop for a video call with the boys, calculating the 14-hour time difference. Their faces appeared on screen, crowding together to fit in the frame, with Lucy supervising in the background. "Mama!" they chorused. At 4.5, they were articulate, curious, and increasingly distinct in their personalities despite their identical appearance. "Hello, my loves," Gabriella smiled, exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "Are you being good for Lucy?" "Alex got a gold star in math today," Benjamin reported. "Ben made a volcano that really exploded," Alexander countered. "I played my new song for the class," Christopher added, not to be outdone. Gabriella listened to their excited updates, treasuring these moments even through the digital distance. "I'll be home in 3 days. Be good, study hard, and remember, we're Santos Millers," they finished in unison, repeating the family motto that had become their rallying cry. After the call ended, Gabriella reviewed her presentation one last time before allowing herself a few hours of restless sleep. The next morning, she stood before the Nakamura Energy Board, delivering a flawless presentation despite her jet lag. The contract was signed that afternoon. Upon her return to New York, Gabriella found herself overseeing the most significant expansion in Horizon's history. The Nakamura contract required additional engineers, project managers, and technical staff. The company doubled in size within 6 months, with new faces filling the once spacious office. Meanwhile, the search for a more permanent home for the family had led Gabriella to an elegant pre-war apartment on the Upper East Side, just blocks from Central Park. The day they moved in, the boys raced down the spacious hallways, their laughter echoing off high ceilings. "Is this really ours, Mama?" Alexander asked, wide-eyed at the grandeur surrounding them. "It is," Gabriella confirmed, watching as they explored the space with wonder. Through the large windows, Central Park spread out like a green carpet, the perfect antidote to their years in cramped apartments. That evening, After the movers had gone and the basics were unpacked, Gabriella sat on the floor of their new living room, surrounded by boxes and the sleeping forms of all three boys who had crashed from the excitement. Lucy brought in 2 glasses of wine and sat beside her. "You've done it," Lucy said softly. "From a shelter to the Upper East Side in 7 years." Gabriella shook her head. "We've done it. I wouldn't be here without you." As the boys approached their 7th birthday, their individual talents became increasingly apparent. Alexander, already advanced in mathematics, was solving equations meant for children twice his age. Gabriella hired Professor Chen from Columbia University to provide specialized tutoring, watching with pride as her eldest son absorbed complex concepts with ease. Benjamin's scientific curiosity had evolved into genuine ingenuity. He dismantled household appliances to understand their mechanics, then reassembled them with improvements. When he constructed a rudimentary water filtration system using Legos and materials from the recycling bin, Gabriella recognized the spark of true innovation. "He has your mind for practical solutions," Lucy observed after Benjamin demonstrated his creation at the dinner table. Christopher's musical ability had progressed from natural aptitude to remarkable talent. His piano teacher, a stern Russian woman who rarely offered praise, suggested he audition for the prestigious Manhattan School of Music's preparatory division. Watching him play, his small fingers moving with precision and feeling beyond his years, Gabriella felt a complex mixture of pride and sadness. "He has his father's hands," she whispered to Lucy during one of Christopher's recitals. "But your heart," Lucy replied firmly. The question Gabriella had been anticipating came one evening as she helped the boys with their homework. Alexander, ever the direct one, looked up from his mathematics workbook. "Why don't we have a dad like the other boys?" The question silenced the room. Benjamin set down his science project, and Christopher stopped practicing finger exercises on the table edge. All 3 identical faces turned to her, their blue eyes, Michael's eyes, full of innocent curiosity. Gabriella set down her pen, choosing her words carefully. "You have 2 mothers who love you very much. Some families are different." "But where is our real dad?" Benjamin pressed. "Everyone else knows who their dad is." The word "real" stung, though Gabriella knew he hadn't meant it cruelly. She glanced at Lucy, who gave an encouraging nod. "Your father wasn't ready to be a dad," Gabriella said simply. "Sometimes adults make choices that aren't about the children, but about their own fears." "Doesn't he want to know us?" Christopher asked, his sensitive nature evident in the slight tremble of his voice. Gabriella gathered all 3 into her arms, breathing in the scent of their hair. "Anyone who doesn't want to know you is missing the most wonderful gift in the world. When you're older, I'll tell you more." The answer satisfied them temporarily, but Gabriella knew the questions would return with increasing complexity as they grew older. That night she added another entry to the private journal she kept for each boy, a record of their lives that included the truth about their father, to be shared when they were ready. As Horizon Innovations continued its meteoric rise, Gabriella found herself increasingly in the public eye. Industry publications featured profiles on the innovative company and its dynamic CEO. Invitations to speak at conferences and universities arrived regularly. With each public appearance, Gabriella's confidence grew, her story inspiring other immigrant entrepreneurs and single mothers. During this period of expansion, Lucy received news that changed everything. The persistent cough she had attributed to New York's winter air was diagnosed as stage 3 lung cancer. "I've never even smoked," she said incredulously as she showed Gabriella the test results in the privacy of their home office. "The prognosis isn't good. We need to talk about the future." Gabriella felt the world tilt beneath her, memories of her pregnancy and Lucy's life-saving intervention flashing through her mind. "We'll fight this. The best doctors, experimental treatments, whatever it takes." Lucy shook her head, pragmatic as always. "We'll fight, but we also need to plan. The boys, the company." We need to protect what we've built." The following week, Gabriella met with the family's attorney, a formidable woman who specialized in complex family structures. "Lucy wants to legally adopt the boys as co-mother," Gabriella explained. "Is that possible given our non-romantic relationship?" The attorney nodded. "Second parent adoption doesn't require marriage in New York State. But I have to ask, is there a biological father in the picture who might contest this?" Gabriella's expression hardened. "Legally, no. He has never acknowledged paternity, provided support, or shown any interest in their existence. Nevertheless, a man with resources could potentially cause complications if he ever decided to claim parental rights. Then we need to ensure that never happens," Gabriella stated firmly. The adoption process proceeded swiftly, expedited by Lucy's diagnosis. The ceremony was intimate, just the family, the attorney, and the judge in her chambers. The boys, understanding this was important but not fully comprehending why, wore their best suits and solemnly repeated their new hyphenated surname, Santos Miller. "This means Lucy is officially your mother too," Gabriella explained afterward as they celebrated with ice cream. "But she was already our mom," Alexander pointed out, logical as always. "Now it's official on paper," Lucy explained, hugging each boy carefully, mindful of the port recently installed in her chest for chemotherapy. "So we have two official moms?" Benjamin clarified. "Yes," Gabriella confirmed. "Two mothers who love you more than anything in the world." That evening, after the boys were asleep, Gabriella checked her investment account. Through careful management and strategic purchases, the fund now controlled 8% of Thomson Enterprises stock, still a minority position, but growing steadily. The company's performance had weakened under Michael's leadership, making the shares more affordable with each quarter. The following day, Gabriella attended a board meeting at Horizon's headquarters. The company had grown to employ over 50 people, many of them experienced executives hired from larger corporations. As CEO, Gabriella now commanded respect from people who might once have dismissed her. Older men in expensive suits who nodded attentively as she outlined the company's global expansion strategy. After the meeting, Gabriella took a detour on her way back to the office. The Thomson Enterprises building stood imposing against the skyline, its logo prominently displayed across the facade. Gabriella walked through the lobby, no longer a nervous receptionist but a confident CEO in her own right. Several employees glanced at her with vague recognition, unable to place where they had seen her before. At the reception desk, her old position, Gabriella requested a meeting with the sustainability department. The young man at the desk, unaware of her history with the company, directed her to the 32nd floor. As the elevator ascended, Gabriella reflected on the symmetry of the moment. 10 years ago, she had stood in this same elevator, a pregnant receptionist terrified of losing everything. Today, she returned as the CEO of a rising competitor, with 3 brilliant children and a growing stake in the company that had once discarded her. The sustainability director greeted her with the deference reserved for potential partners. "Ms. Santos Miller, we've been following Horizon's innovations with great interest. Perhaps there's potential for collaboration." Gabriella smiled diplomatically. "Perhaps, though I understand Thomson Enterprises has historically prioritized short-term profits over sustainable practices. Under new leadership, we're exploring more progressive directions," he assured her. Gabriella nodded, knowing the new leadership was Michael, whose primary innovation had been cutting corners while maximizing executive compensation. "I look forward to seeing that evolution reflected in your quarterly reports." That night, Gabriella and Lucy sat beside the boys' beds, watching them sleep after an exhausting day at the Natural History Museum. Lucy, visibly weakened by her recent treatment, reached out to stroke Christopher's hair. "Promise me you'll tell them everything someday," she whispered. "The good and the bad. They deserve to know their story." "I promise," Gabriella replied, taking Lucy's hand. "When they're ready." As she watched Lucy drift to sleep after another chemotherapy session, Gabriella reflected on how fate had brought this extraordinary mentor into her life, without suspecting that in just 2 years, Lucy's legacy would become the final weapon in her vengeance against Michael Thompson. As Lucy drifted to sleep, the soft rhythm of her breathing mirrored the gentle rise and fall of the boys' chests in the next room. Gabriella sat alone at the kitchen table, her laptop open to the latest Thompson Enterprises quarterly report. The numbers told a story of mismanagement disguised as aggressive expansion, Michael's signature strategy. She closed the file and opened her investment portfolio. 8% and growing. Patient, methodical, inevitable. Winter descended upon New York with unusual ferocity that year. Snow piled in drifts along Park Avenue as Gabriella walked Lucy to her treatments at Memorial Sloan Kettering. Lucy's once sturdy frame had grown frail, her vibrant energy diminishing with each passing week despite the cutting-edge therapies they'd secured. "I've revised my will," Lucy mentioned casually as they sat in the private treatment room, chemotherapy drugs flowing through the port in her chest. "Made some changes you should know about?" Gabriella set aside the quarterly projections she'd been reviewing. "What changes?" "I've established a trust for the boys, of course, but I've also created something else, the Miller Fund, dedicated to supporting women-led enterprises in sustainable technology." "Lucy, please don't..." "Don't what? Plan for reality?" Lucy's smile was gentle but firm. "We both know where this is heading, Gabriella. My oncologist has stopped using the word remission and started using comfort care." Tears threatened, but Gabriella blinked them away. Lucy deserved better than emotional indulgence. "Tell me about this fund," she said instead. Lucy's eyes brightened with purpose. "It's structured to operate independently, but with you as the principal advisor. The initial endowment is significant, my family money plus the insurance." "Insurance?" "I took out a policy when we started Horizon, $8 million. It seemed excessive then, but now..." She shrugged. "The fund will have roughly $12 million to start." Gabriella took Lucy's hand, noting how light it felt, how prominent the veins had become. "You've thought of everything." "Not everything," Lucy admitted. "I haven't figured out how to be there when Alex wins his first mathematics prize, or when Ben patents his first invention, or when Chris plays Carnegie Hall." 4 months later, on a clear spring morning, Lucy Miller passed away quietly in her sleep. The funeral was held at a small chapel in the Upper East Side, filled with colleagues, clients, and friends who had been touched by Lucy's integrity and vision. The triplets, now 8 years old, stood beside Gabriella in perfectly tailored black suits, their identical faces solemn but composed. The CEO of Nakamura Energy had flown in from Tokyo. The mayor delivered a brief tribute. Environmental activists and business leaders alike came to honor a woman who had proven that principles and profits could coexist. Afterward, at the reading of the will, Lucy's attorney explained the details of the trust established for the boys and the structure of the Miller Fund. Ms. Miller was quite specific about the fund's purpose, the attorney explained. Investment in women-led enterprises with a particular focus on renewable energy and sustainable technology. You, Ms. Santos Miller, have been named the fund's principal advisor, with full discretion over investment decisions. That evening, after the boys had gone to bed emotionally exhausted, Gabriella sat alone in Lucy's office, a room she had avoided entering since her partner's death. Every surface held memories. The desk where they had sketched the first designs for the Horizon system, the worn leather chair where Lucy had sat during countless brainstorming sessions, the bookshelf containing environmental treatises and business manuals side by side. On the desk stood a framed photograph of Lucy holding the triplets as newborns, Gabriella beside her, exhausted but radiant. Gabriella picked it up, tracing the outline of Lucy's face through the glass. "I don't know how to do this without you," she whispered to the empty room. But even as the words left her lips, Gabriella knew they weren't entirely true. Lucy had spent 9 years preparing her for this moment, teaching, mentoring, challenging her to become not just a successful entrepreneur, but a visionary leader. That night, fueled by grief and determination, Gabriella redesigned Horizon's 5-year strategy. The company would expand beyond storage systems into comprehensive energy solutions. They would target international markets more aggressively. They would develop consumer applications of their technology. As dawn broke over Manhattan, Gabriella finally slept, the new business plan complete beside her. When she awoke, a strange calm had settled over her. The path forward was clear, illuminated by Lucy's legacy and her own unrelenting drive. 6 months after Lucy's passing, Gabriella sat across from 3 Google executives in Horizon's conference room. The lead negotiator, a man with silver temples and an expensive watch, slid a document across the polished table. $2 billion for Horizon Innovations. Full acquisition, with you staying on as division head for 3 years minimum. Your team remains intact. Gabriella glanced at the offer without touching the document. And the patents? Transfer to Google, naturally, with licensing fees paid to the original inventors for 20 years. She nodded thoughtfully as if considering the proposal. That's a generous offer for a company our size. We believe Horizon's storage technology will be transformative for our data centers globally. Plus, the environmental benefits align with our corporate values. Gabriella stood, smoothing her Armani skirt. I appreciate your interest, but Horizon isn't for sale. Not at $2 billion, not at any price. The executives exchanged confused glances. Perhaps you should discuss this with your board before making such a definitive statement. I am the board, Gabriella replied simply. 51% ownership has its privileges, but I'd be happy to discuss licensing arrangements for specific applications. That evening, Gabriella attended a parent-teacher conference at Harvard Junior Academy, where all 3 boys had earned merit scholarships. The prestigious preparatory school occupied a historic building near Columbia University, its hallways lined with photographs of alumni who had gone on to illustrious careers. Alexander's mathematical abilities are simply extraordinary, his teacher explained, showing Gabriella a problem set that appeared to contain university-level calculus. We've arranged for him to study with a mathematics professor from Columbia twice weekly. In Benjamin's classroom, his science teacher proudly displayed a water purification prototype the 8-year-old had designed. He's identified a novel approach to removing microplastics. We've suggested he enter it in the National Science Foundation's Young Innovator competition. Christopher's music instructor, a former concert pianist, spoke with barely contained excitement. His technical proficiency is remarkable, but it's his emotional interpretation that's truly unique in a child his age. The Manhattan School of Music has expressed interest in adding him to their pre-college program. As Gabriella walked the ornate corridors between meetings, she couldn't help but imagine Michael's reaction if he could see these extraordinary boys, his sons, thriving despite his rejection. Each achievement felt like a personal vindication, proof that his dismissal had been the beginning of something remarkable, not the end. 2 weeks later, Alexander stood on a stage accepting a national mathematics medal, his brothers cheering loudly from the audience. Gabriella watched from the front row, her chest tight with pride and a complex emotion she couldn't quite name, something between triumph and sorrow that these moments weren't being shared with the boy's father, not because he deserved to share them, but because the boys deserved to be witnessed fully by all those who should love them. The questions about their father became more direct as the boys grew older. One evening, as Gabriella helped them with homework at the dining table, Benjamin looked up from his science project. Everyone else knows who their father is, he said abruptly. Why can't we know? Alexander and Christopher stopped working, their attention immediately captured. This was clearly a discussion they'd had among themselves. Gabriella set down her pen. Your father wasn't ready to be a father. When you're older, I'll tell you more. How much older? Alexander pressed, practical as always. "When you're old enough to understand adult decisions and their consequences," Gabriella replied carefully. "We're not babies anymore," Christopher said quietly. "We understand more than you think." Gabriella looked at their identical faces, so reminiscent of Michael, yet uniquely their own. "I know you do. And I promise, when the time is right, I'll tell you everything. But for now, please trust that I'm protecting you, not keeping secrets just to keep secrets." The boys exchanged glances, communicating in that silent language only they shared, before nodding in reluctant acceptance. Later that night, Gabriella logged into her investment portfolio. The Miller Fund had been strategically acquiring Thomson Enterprises stock for 18 months. Combined with her personal holdings, they now controlled 25% of the company, a significant minority position that could influence board decisions. As she studied the latest acquisition report, the television in her office played a business news segment. Michael Thompson appeared on screen, standing before Thomson Enterprises headquarters, announcing a strategic workforce reduction that would eliminate 3,000 jobs while streamlining operations for maximum shareholder value. The camera cut to his departure in a chauffeur-driven Bentley, then to tearful employees outside the building, clutching termination notices. The next segment showed Michael at the Monaco Yacht Show, purchasing a $90 million vessel. Gabriella closed the portfolio report and opened a new document, beginning to outline the next phase of her plan. The Miller Fund would accelerate its acquisition of Thomson shares over the coming year, focusing on blocks held by institutional investors who had grown dissatisfied with Michael's leadership. 2 days later, Gabriella attended an industry leadership summit where Michael was scheduled as the keynote speaker. She selected her seat carefully, visible enough to be noticed but positioned where he would have to seek her out rather than accidentally encounter her. Michael took the stage to polite applause, his once boyish features now hardened into the confident mask of corporate power. He spoke about disruptive innovation and market dominance, with the practiced ease of someone who had inherited rather than earned his position. From her strategic vantage point, Gabriella observed him without being observed. The man who had once dismissed her as a Latina receptionist who could barely string together a sentence would not recognize her now in her Bottega Veneta suit, her posture radiating the quiet confidence of genuine success. After the presentation, Gabriella slipped out before the networking reception. She had seen enough, the emptiness behind his rehearsed charm, the hollowness of achievements purchased rather than earned. The contrast with her sons, his sons, could not have been more stark. While Michael acquired yachts and vacation homes, Alexander, Benjamin, and Christopher were developing minds and talents that would genuinely change the world. That evening, the boys crowded around the dinner table, enthusiastically sharing their day's accomplishments and challenges. "Professor Himura says my equation proof might be publishable," Alexander reported between bites of pasta. "My water filter prototype is working," Benjamin added. "It removed 98% of contaminants in the lab test." Christopher, always more reflective, waited until his brothers had spoken. "My piano teacher entered me in the Young Artists competition at Carnegie Hall." Gabriella listened, asking questions that demonstrated her understanding of their specialized interests. As they chattered excitedly about future plans, she caught herself smiling at their familiar phrase, "When we grow up, we're going to work at Mom's company." At receiving the invitation to the prestigious annual gala of the New York Business Foundation, Gabriella didn't imagine that fate had chosen that specific night for the encounter that would redefine the meaning of justice and revenge. As she watched her sons discussing their future at Horizon Innovations, Gabriella couldn't help but marvel at how her path of vengeance had produced something genuinely beautiful. The boys' enthusiasm, their brilliance, their unity. These were gifts that had emerged from Michael's rejection, like diamonds formed under the crushing pressure of abandonment. 2 years passed with the relentless momentum of Gabriella's ambition. Horizon Innovations expanded beyond its original mandate, developing comprehensive renewable energy systems that were transforming urban infrastructure across 3 continents. What had begun as a desperate mother's fight for survival had evolved into one of the most innovative clean technology companies in the world, valued at $1.8 billion by conservative market analysts. One crisp autumn morning, Gabriella stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office, watching Manhattan awaken 40 stories below. The skyline had become a measuring stick for her progress, each building representing a milestone overcome, a barrier shattered, a doubt silenced. Her executive assistant Mira entered with the morning's correspondence. "The fortune profile is out," she announced, placing the magazine on Gabriella's desk. "They're calling you the Queen of Clean Tech." The cover featured Gabriella in a power stance, arms crossed against the backdrop of Horizon's flagship solar installation in Arizona. The headline read, "40 Under 40, How Gabriella Santos Miller Revolutionized Energy Storage and Built a $1.8 billion Empire." Gabriella skimmed the article, noting with satisfaction that it highlighted her journey without mentioning Michael Thompson. Her story belonged to her alone. She had reclaimed the narrative he had tried to write for her 10 years ago. "Also, this arrived by courier," Mira added, placing a heavy cream envelope on top of the magazine. Gabriella recognized the embossed logo immediately. The New York Business Foundation. Inside was an invitation to their annual gala, held at the Plaza Hotel in 3 weeks' time. The event gathered the elite of Manhattan's business community for an evening of networking, philanthropy, and strategic alliance building. Her eyes narrowed at the list of sponsors. There, prominently displayed as the principal patron, Thompson Enterprises. "Michael will be there," she murmured, almost to herself. "Pardon?" Mira asked. "Nothing important." Gabriella placed the invitation in her drawer. "Schedule a meeting with our PR team this afternoon. I need to discuss gala preparations." Later that day, Gabriella sat through a high-stakes investor meeting, securing $400 million in new funding for Horizon's expansion into European markets. Her presentation was flawless, her command of the room absolute. These men, and they were mostly men, no longer saw her accent as a liability, but as a distinctive part of her global perspective. "Ms. Santos Miller," began the lead investor as they concluded, "your vision for renewable infrastructure integration is genuinely revolutionary. We're not just investing in Horizon, we're investing in you." Gabriella smiled, remembering a time when such men would have looked through her as she cleaned their offices or served their coffee. "I appreciate your confidence," she replied. "Horizon will exceed your expectations." Throughout the day, the invitation weighed on her mind. The Foundation Gala represented a prime networking opportunity, but it also meant potentially facing Michael for the first time in a decade. Was she ready? Were the boys ready? That evening, Gabriella returned to her Upper East Side apartment earlier than usual. She found Alexander at the dining table surrounded by mathematical proofs, Benjamin in the living room fine-tuning his latest prototype, and Christopher at the piano, his fingers dancing through a Chopin etude. "Mom's home early," Benjamin announced, looking up from his work. The 3 10-year-old boys converged on her with identical enthusiasm, their blue eyes, Michael's eyes, bright with the day's accomplishments. After dinner, as the boys returned to their respective passions, Gabriella researched Thompson Enterprises' recent activities. The company had been struggling under Michael's leadership, with declining profits and increasing debt. Recent quarterly reports showed aggressive cost-cutting measures and unsustainable expansion efforts. Classic signs of a company being stripped for short-term gains at the expense of long-term stability. A financial news article featured a recent photo of Michael with his much younger Russian fiancée at a charity auction, the woman displaying an ostentatious engagement ring while Michael looked increasingly dissipated despite his expensive suit. The caption noted his recent purchase of a second vacation home in Aspen, even as Thompson Enterprises announced another round of layoffs. Gabriella closed her laptop and called her attorney. "Julia, I need an update on our position with Thompson Enterprises." "Perfect timing," the attorney replied. "The Miller Fund plus your personal holdings now control 53% of Thompson voting shares. We've kept the acquisitions distributed enough to avoid triggering SEC disclosure requirements, but we're ready whenever you want to make your move." "And the board vote?" "We've confirmed quiet support from 4 additional members. They're increasingly concerned about Michael's leadership. The timing couldn't be better." Gabriella nodded, though the attorney couldn't see her. "Prepare the necessary documentation. I want everything ready by the Foundation Gala." The following day, Gabriella visited Bergdorf Goodman for a final fitting of her gala dress. The Valentino creation was a masterpiece in sapphire blue, its elegant lines emphasizing her confident posture and complementing her olive complexion. As the stylist made minute adjustments, Gabriella studied her reflection. The frightened receptionist who had stood trembling in Michael's penthouse was nowhere to be seen. In her place stood a woman of accomplishment and power, her eyes clear and focused, her bearing regal. Even her accent, once a source of insecurity, had been embraced as part of her international mystique. "The dress is perfect," she told the stylist. "Now I need to see about suits for my sons." At Brooks Brothers, the triplets stood patiently as tailors measured them for their first formal suits. Despite their identical appearances, their personalities shone through in subtle ways. Alexander's analytical gaze assessing the fabric quality, Benjamin examining the construction of the garments, Christopher more concerned with comfort and movement. "Mom, do we really have to wear ties?" Christopher complained, tugging at his collar. Gabriella straightened the silk accessory with gentle hands. "This night is special. One day you'll understand why." That evening, her driver delivered a detailed dossier on Thompson Enterprises' current situation. The company was nearly bankrupt, surviving largely on its reputation and Michael's increasingly desperate financial maneuvers. Several subsidiaries had been sold off to cover mounting debts, and employee morale had plummeted amid repeated rounds of layoffs. Gabriella reviewed the Securities and Exchange Commission notification she would present to Michael, the official documentation of her controlling interest in his family's company. Each word was precisely chosen, the legal language elegant in its finality. The night before the gala, Gabriella stood at her penthouse window, gazing across the Manhattan skyline. Somewhere out there was Michael Thompson, unaware that the woman he had discarded was about to claim everything he had inherited but failed to cherish. Her phone rang, her attorney confirming the final arrangements. "The SEC filing is ready to be submitted immediately after the board vote. Thompson Enterprises will be officially under your control by Monday morning." "And the press release?" "Drafted and approved. The Wall Street Journal has already requested an exclusive interview." Gabriella ended the call and checked on her sleeping sons. Their peaceful faces, so similar yet distinct to her maternal eye, reinforced her resolve. This wasn't just about vengeance anymore. It was about justice, about proving that talent and determination could overcome prejudice and privilege. The day of the gala arrived with picture-perfect autumn weather. Gabriella attended a final strategy meeting with her executive team, reviewed the European expansion plans, and conducted a video interview with a German business magazine before returning home to prepare. Her personal stylist arrived at 4 o'clock, transforming Gabriella's naturally beautiful features with subtle makeup that emphasized her expressive eyes and sculpted cheekbones. Her dark hair was arranged in an elegant updo, complemented by discreet diamond earrings. Real wealth, she had learned, never needed to announce itself loudly. As she slipped into the sapphire Valentino gown, Gabriella reflected on her journey. From the frightened immigrant struggling to hide her pregnancy to the powerful CEO adorned in haute couture, every step had been earned through relentless work and strategic vision. The boys emerged from their rooms in their Brooks Brothers suits, looking suddenly older and remarkably handsome. Despite their identical appearances, Gabriella could instantly distinguish them. Alexander by his confident stance, Benjamin by his curious eyes, Christopher by his sensitive smile. "You look beautiful, Mom," Alexander said, his analytical gaze approving of her transformation. Like a queen, Benjamin added. Christopher, always the most emotionally perceptive, simply hugged her, careful not to wrinkle her gown. Gabriella helped them with their ties, a moment of maternal tenderness amid the evening's strategic purpose. "You are the most important men in my life," she told them softly. "Everything I've built for you." The final check, clutch containing the SEC notification, smartphone, emergency contact information for the boys. Gabriella surveyed her reflection once more, satisfaction mingling with anticipation. Tonight would change everything, the culmination of a decade-long journey from rejection to triumph. As the boys put on their overcoats, her secure phone chimed with a message from her chief financial officer. Thompson stock down 15% after poor quarterly results. Board members increasingly restless. Perfect timing. The sleek black limousine arrived precisely at 7:30. Gabriella knelt carefully, mindful of her gown, to address her sons at eye level. "Tonight is about more than a party," she explained. "It's about seeing the results of hard work and determination. Watch how people interact, how alliances form, how business happens beyond boardrooms. This is part of your education, too." The boys nodded solemnly, understanding that their mother never did anything without purpose. As they stepped into the limousine, Gabriella made one final call to her attorney, confirming that the Thompson Enterprises board members aligned with her would be strategically placed throughout the gala. "Are we ready for your first gala, my princes?" she asked as the car pulled away from the curb. "Ready!" they chorused, excitement overcoming their initial nervousness. As the limousine glided toward the Plaza Hotel, Gabriella tightened her grip on the folder containing the documents that would destroy Michael Thompson, without imagining that the true blow wouldn't be the papers she carried, but the three identical young faces that reflected the man who had rejected them. The limousine glided to a stop before the Plaza Hotel's grand entrance, where red carpet unfurled between brass stanchions and velvet ropes. Flashbulbs illuminated the night as photographers documented the arrival of New York's business elite. Gabriella inhaled deeply, centering herself for what lay ahead. "Remember," she told the boys as the chauffeur opened their door, "stand straight, smile politely, and if anyone asks about your father, we say we have two wonderful mothers," Alexander finished, repeating the familiar script. The triplets emerged first, their identical faces drawing immediate attention from the photographers. Gabriella followed, the sapphire Valentino catching the light as she stepped onto the red carpet. A ripple of whispers swept through the gathered press. "Ms. Santos Miller, over here." "Gabriella, a moment for the journal." She paused briefly, allowing just enough photographs to satisfy protocol before guiding her sons inside. The plaza's ballroom had been transformed into a glittering wonderland of crystal chandeliers and ice sculptures, the air perfumed with exotic flowers and privilege. Across the room, Michael Thompson held court near the main bar, a glass of scotch in one hand, the other resting possessively on the waist of a willowy redhead at least 20 years his junior. His face had hardened over the decade, lines of dissipation etching themselves around eyes that had once charmed Gabriella. The young woman beside him displayed an enormous diamond ring, tilting her hand occasionally to catch the light. Gabriella noted these details without emotion, cataloging them as one might observe weather patterns before a strategic military operation. She guided the boys toward their assigned table, deliberately positioned with clear sightlines to Michael's location while remaining outside his immediate awareness. "Mom, there's the mayor," Benjamin whispered excitedly, pointing discreetly toward a silver-haired man in conversation with tech executives. "And the governor," added Alexander, ever observant. "Table 3 with the Nakamura Energy delegation." Christopher, more attuned to aesthetics than power dynamics, simply commented, "The ceiling paintings are beautiful." Gabriella smiled at their observations, pride momentarily overshadowing her mission. After dinner, I'll introduce you to some of these people. Remember, connections are as valuable as capital." Michael remained oblivious to her presence for nearly 30 minutes, engaged in animated conversation with financial power brokers. Then, as Gabriella accepted a glass of mineral water from a passing server, his gaze swept across the room and froze. The moment stretched between them, his eyes widening in confusion, then narrowing in concentration as he tried to place her transformed appearance in the context of a memory he'd likely tried to bury. Gabriella met his stare unflinchingly before deliberately turning away to address an approaching senator. "Gabriela Santos Miller, your keynote at the Energy Summit last month was brilliant," the politician gushed, shaking her hand warmly. "Thank you, Senator. Have you met my sons, Alexander, Benjamin, and Christopher?" The boys greeted the senator with impeccable manners, engaging him in surprisingly sophisticated conversation about renewable energy legislation. From her peripheral vision, Gabriella noticed Michael still watching, his expression oscillating between disbelief and growing discomfort. His young fiancée tugged at his sleeve, clearly annoyed by his distraction. "Who is that woman?" Gabriella read the question on her lips. The banker beside them leaned in to answer, and Gabriella could imagine the response. Gabriela Santos Miller, the genius behind Horizon Innovations. They say she turned down a $2 billion acquisition offer from Google last year. For the next hour, Gabriella strategically circulated through the ballroom, introducing the triplets to influential figures while maintaining a careful distance from Michael. The boys impressed everyone they met, Alexander discussing economic theory with a Federal Reserve Board member, Benjamin engaging a NASA administrator about water reclamation technology, Christopher charming the Lincoln Center's artistic director with his knowledge of classical compositions. Michael drank steadily throughout this time, his eyes following Gabriella with increasing intensity. His fiancée eventually abandoned him to socialize with younger guests, leaving him to brood alone at the edge of the bar. The formal dinner portion of the evening began with a welcome from the foundation's president, followed by recognition of major donors. When Gabriella was called to the stage as the largest individual contributor, her $5 million donation having surpassed Thomson Enterprises' corporate gift, the ballroom erupted in applause. "Horizon Innovations believes in reinvesting in the community that supported us," she stated simply, her accent now a polished element of her public persona rather than a liability. Environmental sustainability and social responsibility must work in tandem. As she returned to her table, she noticed Michael's face had flushed with what appeared to be equal parts recognition and anger. He now knew exactly who she was. The elegant dinner proceeded through multiple courses, each more exquisite than the last. The triplets handled the formal place settings with practiced ease, having been thoroughly coached in etiquette appropriate to such occasions. Throughout the meal, Gabriella observed Michael watching the boys, his expression increasingly troubled as he noted their identical features, their mannerisms, the unmistakable color of their eyes, his eyes. As dessert was being served, a waiter carrying a tray of champagne flutes stumbled slightly near Gabriella's table, sloshing liquid onto the floor beside her chair. Before the flustered server could apologize, Michael, who had been making his way toward her table, seized the opportunity. "Hey, you!" he called loudly, alcohol loosening his restraint. "Looks like you've worked here before. Why don't you show off your skills and clean up this mess for us?" The surrounding conversations halted abruptly. Executives nearby laughed nervously at what they perceived as harmless teasing of the waitstaff. The waiter looked mortified. Gabriella rose slowly, turning to face Michael with glacial composure. The room seemed to still as guests registered the tension crackling between them. "Michael Thompson," she said, her voice carrying in the sudden quiet. A decade later and still exhibiting the same lack of class. Confusion flickered across his face, followed by dawning recognition as her accent, more refined but still distinctly Brazilian, triggered buried memories. "Do we know each other?" he attempted, retreating slightly. "Intimately," Gabriella replied, her smile razor-sharp. "But you were right about one thing. I really wasn't enough for you back then. Today, I'm considerably more." Color drained from Michael's face as complete recognition hit him. His eyes darted to the triplets, who had risen to stand protectively near their mother, their identical faces watching him with curiosity rather than recognition. "These are," he stammered, unable to complete the question. "Alexander, Benjamin, and Christopher Santos Miller," Gabriella introduced smoothly. "Boys, this is Michael Thompson, CEO of Thompson Enterprises." The triplets offered perfect handshakes and polite greetings, utterly unaware of the biological connection they shared with the man before them. "They seem talented," Michael managed, his gaze locked on the features that so clearly mirrored his own. "Harvard Junior Academy, all on full merit scholarships," Gabriella responded. "Alex recently won the National Mathematics Championship. Ben has developed a water purifier prototype that's being patented, and Chris will be performing at Carnegie Hall next month." Michael swallowed hard, his earlier arrogance evaporating. "Gabriella, perhaps we could speak privately." "I'm surprised you remember my name considering how you discarded me," she replied, voice steady despite the decade of emotions churning beneath her composed exterior. "That immigrant who could barely speak English without an accent has built a company valued at $1.8 billion. What's Thompson Enterprises worth these days? 600 million? 700? Michael's face reddened, caught between embarrassment and anger. Nearby guests had stopped pretending not to listen, openly watching the confrontation unfold. "You can't just appear after all these years," he began, struggling to reassert control. "Why not? You appeared in my life and disappeared when it was convenient," Gabriella countered. "But there's something you should know." The foundation president's voice cut through the tension, announcing that dinner was concluding and the charity auction would begin momentarily. Guests were invited to move toward the adjacent salon. Gabriella smiled enigmatically, leaning closer to Michael so only he could hear her next words. "After the auction, Michael, I have a revelation that will shake your little empire to its core." The triplets, sensing something significant but not understanding its nature, looked questioningly at their mother. "Boys, why don't you go speak with the governor's son? He mentioned he plays cello too, Christopher." As the boys moved away, Michael grabbed Gabriella's elbow. "What game are you playing? Those boys, they're mine, aren't they?" "They're mine," she corrected, removing his hand from her arm. "They've always been mine. Your contribution was purely biological and long ago relinquished." "I have rights," he hissed, desperation entering his voice. "Rights?" Gabriella's laugh was soft but cutting. What an interesting concept coming from the man who offered $5,000 to solve the problem. "We'll discuss your rights after the auction." She moved away, gracefully joining a group of tech executives, leaving Michael standing alone, visibly shaken. Throughout the auction, he barely participated, his eyes constantly returning to Gabriella and the triplets, seeing for the first time what his cruel dismissal had cost him. When Gabriella bid $600,000 for a private concert with the New York Philharmonic, a gift for Christopher's musical development, she explained to tablemates, Michael seemed to physically shrink, the magnitude of what he had thrown away becoming increasingly apparent. As the auction concluded, Gabriella felt a strange calm settle over her. This confrontation, rehearsed in her mind for a decade, was unfolding with a poetic justice she couldn't have scripted better herself. The terrified receptionist with the positive pregnancy test had become the woman everyone in the room wished to befriend, invest with, or emulate. Meanwhile, the golden heir who had discarded her was watching his family legacy crumble under his mismanagement. When the president of the foundation announced dinner, interrupting their momentary confrontation, Gabriella smiled enigmatically at Michael and whispered, "After dinner, we have a pending conversation about the future of Thompson Enterprises, or what will remain of it." The elegantly arranged tables of the Plaza Hotel ballroom gleamed under crystal chandeliers as waiters in crisp black uniforms served the first course. Gabriella returned to her table with practiced poise, the weight of Michael's stunned recognition following her across the room. The triplets were already seated, their excited chatter momentarily paused as they observed the proper etiquette for formal dining that she had taught them. Michael remained standing for several long moments, his complexion ashen, before stumbling back to his assigned table. Throughout the appetizer course, a delicate arrangement of seared scallops with citrus reduction, his gaze rarely left Gabriella and the boys. His young fiancée, noting his distraction, grew increasingly irritated, her crimson lips forming a tight line as she attempted to regain his attention. "Mom, that man keeps looking at us," Alexander observed quietly, his analytical mind always processing patterns. "The one you were talking to earlier. He's the CEO of Thompson Enterprises," Gabriella explained smoothly. "He's probably surprised to see young gentlemen at such an event." Benjamin studied Michael with curious eyes. "His company has terrible environmental practices. We learned about them in sustainability class." "Yes, they do," Gabriella agreed, her voice neutral despite the satisfaction warming her chest. Christopher, always the most emotionally perceptive, tilted his head. "He looks sad when he watches us. Did you say something to upset him?" "Sometimes the truth is upsetting to people who aren't used to hearing it," she replied, squeezing his hand gently. The main course arrived, perfectly prepared Kobe beef for the adults, elegant chicken preparations for the children. Across the room, Michael barely touched his plate, his hand instead reaching repeatedly for his Scotch glass. His fiancée eventually stood in evident frustration, abandoning him to join a group of younger socialites at another table. At the center table, Gabriella engaged effortlessly with tech executives and financial leaders, her boys demonstrating the polish and intelligence that had become their hallmark. Alexander explained complex mathematical theories to the fascinated CEO of a major tech firm. Benjamin detailed his water purification prototype to the Environment Secretary of New York State, who exchanged business cards with the 10-year-old, treating him with the respect typically reserved for adult innovators. Christopher charmed the governor's wife with stories about his preparation for his Carnegie Hall debut. "Your sons are extraordinary," whispered the woman seated beside Gabriella, the director of a prominent foundation. "Their father must be incredibly proud." "They have two mothers who adore them," Gabriella replied evenly. "Lucy Miller was their co-parent until her passing. Of course I remember Lucy. Brilliant woman. What a legacy she left in these boys." Throughout the meal, Michael made several abortive attempts to approach Gabriella's table, each time intercepted by someone eager to speak with the rising star of clean energy. His increasing intoxication became apparent in his loosened tie and unsteady gait, drawing disapproving glances from the more composed executives present. As dessert, an artistic arrangement of chocolate decadence and gold leaf was being served, Michael finally managed to maneuver his way to the edge of Gabriella's table during a moment when she was temporarily alone, the boys having been invited by the governor's son to examine a vintage watch collection near the auction display. "We need to talk now," he insisted, his voice carrying a slight slur. The confident corporate titan had been replaced by a man visibly shaken to his core. Gabriella dabbed her lips with her napkin and nodded. "Boys," she called to the triplets, "why don't you go meet the governor's son? He mentioned he plays cello too, Christopher." As the boys moved away with excited chatter, she turned to Michael. "Let's find somewhere quieter." They moved to a small alcove off the main ballroom, partially concealed by an ornate floral arrangement. Michael's hands trembled slightly as he reached for the wall to steady himself. "What kind of game is this?" he demanded, desperation bleeding through his attempt at authority. "Why did you never tell me about them?" Gabriella's laugh held no humor. "Tell you? You gave me $5,000 to solve the problem with instructions to never contact you again. You said the Thompson Enterprises wouldn't be run by half-Brazilian bastards. Do you remember those words?" Michael paled further. "I was young, scared, and I was pregnant, alone, and penniless," Gabriella cut in, her composure never wavering. "But that's ancient history now. They're my sons." His voice rose slightly before he caught himself, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "I have rights." "Rights?" Now Gabriella's voice gained an edge, the only indication of the emotions churning beneath her poised exterior. "You renounced any rights when you discarded me like garbage. As for your sons, legally they are Santos Millers. Lucy Miller legally adopted the boys as co-mother before passing away last year. Her will ensured they were recognized as her legitimate heirs." "This is absurd. I'll go to court." "Do that," Gabriella smiled, reaching into her clutch to extract an envelope which she handed to him. "But first, read this." Michael tore open the document, his eyes widening as he scanned its contents. "What does this mean?" "It means that through the Miller Fund, established in Lucy's memory, I've acquired 38% of Thompson Enterprises shares over the past 5 years. Combined with the 15% I purchased through Horizon, I am the majority owner of your family's company. The board votes tomorrow to decide the new CEO." Michael's face drained of all remaining color. The envelope slipped from his fingers to the floor. "That's impossible." "Not for a determined woman intent on proving her worth." Gabriella's voice remained calm, almost gentle, as she delivered the culmination of her decade-long strategy. "That $5,000 check? It was my first investment, every penny multiplied with the single purpose of reaching this moment." "What do you want?" Michael's voice had lost all pretense of strength. "Money? Recognition of the boys?" Gabriella stepped closer, her voice low but cutting. "I want nothing from you, Michael. This isn't a negotiation. It's a notification. Starting tomorrow, Thompson Enterprises will begin a complete transformation. Sustainable practices, employee benefits, genuine social responsibility. Everything you've neglected for a decade. You can't do this to me. I already have." Her calm certainty seemed to wound him more than anger would have. "As for the boys, they don't know who you are and never will, unless you prove yourself worthy of them." "They're my legitimate heirs." "No, Michael, they're my children. Extraordinary boys who have grown surrounded by love and opportunities that I created for them. You're nothing but a genetic donor who doesn't even deserve that designation." At that moment, the triplets returned, their excited faces brightening the alcove. Alexander, always perceptive to emotional undercurrents, sensed the tension immediately. "Is everything okay, Mom?" he asked, positioning himself slightly in front of his brothers in an unconsciously protective gesture. "Perfectly fine, darling," Gabriella smiled warmly. "Mr. Thompson was just congratulating me on Horizon's success." Michael stared at the boys, his own image reflected in triplicate, and the magnitude of his loss finally seemed to register fully. Not just a family, but a legacy, an empire, and his own redemption. Your incredible children," he managed, fighting visible emotion. "Thank you, sir," Benjamin replied politely, having no idea of the connection between them. "Mr. Thompson was just leaving," Gabriella interjected smoothly. "We have the awards presentation to attend." Michael opened his mouth as if to protest, then closed it, his shoulders sagging in defeat. He turned and walked unsteadily away, a broken silhouette against the glittering backdrop of the gala. Gabriella watched his retreating form without emotion. She felt neither hatred nor pity, only the quiet certainty that justice had been served. "Was that man important?" Christopher asked, his sensitive nature picking up on the undercurrents. "He was once," Gabriella replied truthfully. "Now he's just someone who made poor choices." The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of accolades and connections. Gabriella accepted the Foundation's Innovation Impact Award with gracious humility, her sons beaming from the front row. Several board members of Thompson Enterprises made discreet contact, confirming their support for tomorrow's vote. As their limousine glided through Manhattan's glittering streets toward home, the boys gradually succumbed to exhaustion, their heads nodding despite their attempts to remain awake. Alexander was the last to surrender to sleep, his analytical mind still processing the evening's events. "Mom," he murmured drowsily, "that man, Thompson, he looked at us strangely, like he knew us." Gabriella stroked his hair gently. "The business world is small, darling. Sometimes people think they know you when they really don't." "He has eyes like ours," Alexander observed before sleep finally claimed him. Gabriella gazed at her sleeping sons, their features softened in repose, the resemblance to their father unmistakable yet somehow irrelevant. Michael had contributed genetics, nothing more. Everything that mattered, their character, their brilliance, their kindness, came from the love and guidance she and Lucy had provided. The limousine turned onto Park Avenue, approaching their building. Tomorrow morning, the Wall Street Journal would announce her acquisition of Thompson Enterprises. Michael would be removed as CEO. The company that had once represented her greatest humiliation would become part of her expanding legacy. Yet as she watched her sleeping sons, Gabriella realized that the true victory wasn't in acquiring a company or humiliating a man, but in the journey that had transformed tears of abandonment into indestructible strength, and in the 3 brilliant boys who proved every day that she had always been, and would always be, more than enough. Sunrise bathed Manhattan's skyline in golden light as Gabriella stood at her bedroom window, coffee warming her hands. The Wall Street Journal lay open on her nightstand, its headline announcing what she had orchestrated over a decade. Horizon Innovations acquires controlling stake in Thompson Enterprises. CEO Gabriella Santos Miller promises new era. Beside the newspaper sat her phone, already buzzing with congratulatory messages from industry leaders and nervous inquiries from Thompson executives. The satisfaction she had anticipated felt different in reality. Not the fiery triumph of revenge, but something quieter and more profound. The boys were still sleeping, exhausted from the previous night's gala. Their innocent questions about Michael echoed in her mind. Soon, they would see the headlines. Soon, they would have more questions. Her phone rang. Julia, her attorney. "The board meeting is confirmed for 9 o'clock, Julia reported. "Based on overnight communications, the vote will be unanimous. Michael hasn't responded to any calls." "Has security been arranged?" Gabriella asked. "Extra personnel at both headquarters. Thompson's personal belongings will be packed and delivered to his residence by noon." The efficiency with which a man's career could be dismantled struck Gabriella as oddly poignant. 10 years earlier, Michael had dismissed her with similar cold efficiency, believing she would simply disappear from his world. By 8:30, Gabriella had dressed in a tailored Armani suit, its deep navy color projecting calm authority. The boys emerged from their rooms as she prepared to leave, still in pajamas but wide-eyed with energy. "Is that you in the newspaper, Mom?" Alexander asked, pointing to the journal she had deliberately left visible. "It is," Gabriella confirmed, watching their reactions carefully. "Horizon has acquired another company." Benjamin examined the headline. "Thompson Enterprises? Isn't that the man from last night?" Her children missed nothing. "Yes, his company will now be part of our group." "Is that why he looked at us so strangely?" Christopher asked. Gabriella knelt to their level, choosing her words with care. Mr. Thompson was surprised by how successful Horizon has become. Sometimes people underestimate what others can achieve. This explanation satisfied them temporarily, and Gabriella left them with their nanny, promising to return for dinner with a special announcement. The Thompson Enterprises headquarters loomed like a steel and glass monolith against the morning sky. Gabriella's driver pulled up to the front entrance where Julia waited alongside the company's visibly nervous chief financial officer. "Ms. Santos Miller," the CFO greeted her with forced formality. "The board is assembled in the main conference room." "Thank you, Mr. Winters. And Mr. Thompson?" The man swallowed uncomfortably. "He hasn't arrived yet." The elevator ride to the executive floor felt like moving through time. 11 years ago, Gabriella had ridden this same elevator as a receptionist, nervous about her accent when answering phones. Now she returned as the owner, her accent a distinguished mark of her global perspective. The boardroom fell silent as she entered. 8 men and 2 women, the Thompson Enterprises Board of Directors, rose from their seats, faces revealing varying degrees of apprehension and calculation. "Good morning," Gabriella greeted them, taking the chair at the head of the table, Michael's former seat. "I appreciate your prompt assembly on a Sunday." The board chairman cleared his throat. "Ms. Santos Miller, while we recognize the validity of your controlling interest, I must express the board's concern about the unorthodox nature of this acquisition." "Unorthodox?" Gabriella raised an eyebrow. "Wall Street is built on such strategic acquisitions. Or is it the fact that a woman, an immigrant woman, has acquired a company run by men for 3 generations that you find unorthodox?" The chairman flushed. "Not at all. It's merely the suddenness." "There's nothing sudden about it," Gabriella interrupted smoothly. "The Miller Fund began acquiring Thompson shares 5 years ago. Your quarterly reports have documented the company's decline under Michael Thompson's leadership for 7 consecutive quarters. This transition should come as a relief, not a surprise." Before further objections could be raised, the boardroom door burst open. Michael Thompson stood swaying slightly in the doorway, his expensive suit wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. The previous night's intoxication had clearly evolved into a morning-after state of disheveled anger. "This is a hostile takeover," he announced to the room, pointing unsteadily at Gabriella, "and a personal vendetta." Gabriella remained seated, her posture relaxed despite the tension radiating through the room. "The only hostility, Michael, came from your management style. 7,000 employees terminated while executive bonuses increased 300%. Environmental violations in 6 states. Customer satisfaction at historic lows. You engineered this," he accused, moving farther into the room but not sitting. "You manipulated the market." "I invested strategically in an undervalued asset," Gabriella corrected. "The company's poor performance under your leadership made those investments increasingly affordable." The board members watched this exchange in stunned silence, heads swiveling between the composed new owner and the unraveling former CEO. "This is about the boys," Michael insisted, his voice cracking. "You're using my company to punish me." Gabriella finally stood, her movement deliberate and controlled. "Not everything is about you, Michael. This acquisition is about saving thousands of jobs, implementing sustainable practices, and restoring a once-respected company." She paused, meeting his bloodshot eyes directly. "The vote to remove you as CEO is the first item on today's agenda. Would you like to remain for it, or would you prefer to maintain whatever dignity you have left?" The board members shifted uncomfortably as Michael's face contorted with impotent rage. "You can't erase me," he hissed. "Those boys have my blood. My name should be theirs. Names are earned, not given," Gabriella replied, her voice level despite the fierce protectiveness rising within her. "Now, shall we proceed with the vote?" 15 minutes later, Michael Thompson was officially removed as CEO of his family's company by unanimous board decision. Security escorted him from the building as employees watched from behind office doors, their expressions a mixture of apprehension and cautious hope. Gabriella's first address to the Thompson staff took place in the company's expansive lobby at noon. Hundreds of nervous employees gathered, uncertain about their futures under new ownership. "Change can be frightening," Gabriella acknowledged, standing on the marble staircase. "But I'm not here to dismantle what generations have built. I'm here to transform it." She outlined her vision: environmental responsibility, employee profit sharing, investment in research rather than executive perks. With each promise, the tension in the room visibly decreased. "There will be no mass layoffs," she concluded, addressing their primary fear directly. "Instead, we'll be creating a transition team from both companies to identify the most effective integration strategies. Every voice matters in this process. By late afternoon, Gabriella had completed initial meetings with key department heads, established transition protocols, and approved an official press release detailing the company's new direction. As her driver navigated back toward her Upper East Side apartment, fatigue finally settled into her bones. Not the desperate exhaustion of her early days as a single mother, but the earned weariness of meaningful accomplishment. At home, the boys greeted her with excited hugs and rapid-fire questions about her day. Their innocence, their complete unawareness of how their very existence had shaped the business transaction that would be studied in MBA programs for years, struck Gabriella anew. Later that evening, after dinner and homework, Gabriella gathered them in the living room for the conversation she had been rehearsing for years. "I promised you that when you were older, I would tell you more about your father," she began carefully. 3 identical pairs of blue eyes widened simultaneously. "Today?" Alexander asked. "We're 10 now," Benjamin added, as if this milestone automatically qualified them. Christopher simply watched her face, already sensing the emotional weight of what was coming. "Not the full story," Gabriella clarified. "That will come when you're older still. But there's something you should know about the company Horizon acquired today." She explained in age-appropriate terms that Michael Thompson was their biological father, that he hadn't been ready to be a parent when she told him she was pregnant, and that he had never been part of their lives as a result. "Is that why he looked at us that way last night?" Alexander asked, his analytical mind immediately connecting the dots. "Yes," Gabriella acknowledged. "That was the first time he had seen you." "Does he want to know us now?" Christopher asked, the question Gabriella had most dreaded. She chose her words with extreme care. "He might, but wanting something isn't the same as deserving it or being ready for the responsibility." "Did you buy his company because you're angry at him?" Benjamin asked with characteristic directness. "No," Gabriella answered truthfully. "I acquired Thompson Enterprises because it's a sound business decision that benefits Horizon's long-term strategy. My personal history with Michael Thompson is separate from that decision." The boys absorbed this information with remarkable maturity, asking thoughtful questions that Gabriella answered as honestly as possible without burdening them with the cruelty of their conception's aftermath. "Will we have to see him now?" Alexander finally asked, speaking the fear that had clearly been brewing in all 3. "Not unless you want to," Gabriella assured them, "and not until I believe he has earned the privilege of knowing you." 1 week later, Gabriella's assistant announced an unexpected visitor to her new office in the Thompson building. Michael Thompson stood in the reception area, sober and significantly more composed than at the board meeting. "5 minutes," he requested. "Please." Gabriella considered refusing but ultimately nodded. 5 minutes. In her office, formerly his father's, then his, Michael seemed diminished, his confident swagger replaced by genuine humility. "I've been in therapy," he began awkwardly, "since the gala. 2 daily sessions." "I'm glad to hear it," Gabriella replied neutrally. "I want to know them," he stated simply. "I'll do whatever it takes. Rehabilitation, community service, anything." Gabriella studied him carefully, searching for the calculating manipulator but finding what appeared to be genuine remorse. "The boys know you exist," she said finally. "They know you're their biological father. But they also know you chose not to be part of their lives." Hope flickered across his face. And they deserve better than a father who notices them only after they become a valuable asset," she replied firmly. "If you truly want to know them, prove it through actions, not words." "How?" The single word contained desperation and determination in equal measure. Gabriella handed him a folder. "There's an opening for a regional director in our Sustainable Initiatives division. Middle management, regular hours, standard compensation. Your qualifications match the requirements." "You want me to work for you?" Disbelief colored his voice. "I want you to earn your way back into the world you dismissed with a $5,000 check," Gabriella corrected. "If you're serious about knowing your sons, Prove you're worthy of them first. 1 year later, Gabriella watched through her office window as the boys visited the company headquarters on a school holiday. They explored the engineering department with enthusiasm, unaware they were being observed by a middle manager named Michael T., who had earned a reputation for dedication and surprisingly insightful contributions to the company's sustainability initiatives. He stood at a respectful distance, his eyes reflecting a complex mixture of pride and regret, as the three boys, his sons, demonstrated a prototype they had designed for a school science competition. When Alexander glanced in his direction, Michael nodded politely and received a courteous, "Hello, Mr. T," in return, a small interaction, but one that had been earned through months of genuine effort rather than entitled demand. Gabriella observed this moment with a sense of completion. The frightened receptionist who had once been escorted from Trump Tower with a dismissive check had transformed not only her own life but the very company that had been the site of her greatest humiliation. As Gabriela Santos Miller watched her three brilliant sons playing in the office that once belonged to the man who rejected them, she understood that her true revenge wasn't in taking Michael Thompson's empire, but in building something much greater, a legacy of courage, determination, and unconditional love that not even $5,000 of contempt could prevent from flourishing. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.